everyone, and welcome to Booming Encore's Learning Bites. My name is Susan Williams, and I'm the founder of Booming Encore. And today we're going to be discussing a topic that's probably on everybody's mind as it relates to aging, and that's the desire to actually age in place. So I am delighted to be joined by Scott Fulton. Scott is the president of Home Ideation. He is also the chair of National Aging in Place, as well as being the founder of Longevity Advantage, as well as being an adjunct instructor for longevity and aging at the University of Delaware. So he is definitely very knowledgeable about this topic, and I'm delighted to have him here today to discuss about designing aging in place. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Susan. Great to be with you today.
Well, Scott, why don't we start off with what exactly is aging in place? I know there's a lot of different definitions, but for the purposes of our conversation, what exactly are we talking about?
So I'll start with what it's not. Aging in place isn't for old people. It's for people while they're still working, usually in their 50s and 60s, primarily to be focused on, because it's really part of the whole retirement planning strategy around having, just like you'd plan to have money available in later life or to support you through retirement years, you also need a home environment that's going to support you as well. So it's really just about how you're going to get a sustainable home environment in place, all the livability features that you want to take advantage of, ways to keep you out in your community and kind of engaged in the bigger world for as many years as possible.
Okay, so that's quite the objective. Now, this has changed. This whole field has changed quite a bit over the last number of years. Do you want to explain a little bit about what's going on?
Sure. Well, I'll say the first part is it's relatively new. There's certainly most of us are living longer than we used to. And so with that, we need to have some different plans in place. But I think the biggest thing that's changed and is particularly will change that's coming at us, certainly in our generation, is what I call the boomer inversion. So all through our lives growing up, we looked at kind of the support network that was there for our parents and our grandparents, and we kind of naturally assume that's going to look a lot what our retirement and later life will look like, and it's probably going to look very little like that, because what's happened with the birth rates flipped around now with not only having less than half the number of children, it's now going to be the mushrooms on top. So it's this inversion of this big support is now on top with a much smaller support group behind it. So we're going to need ways to make sure that we're far better planned than our parents and grandparents were, and we're going to have a lot more, I would say, obstacles potentially to navigate with living longer. That's going to bring some new challenges with it as well.
So it's really going to be a supply and demand situation as it relates to care for older people then that we're going to be facing. So it's best to get in front of this. So what sort of suggestions or what do you see that's coming or is available as to how people should possibly prepare?
I think that there's really three areas that I talk about in terms of getting prepared for. The first one is really, and I threw up some screens here for you just to show you what we're talking about, because I think it's really important, is primary access to your home. Right? So if you want to keep living in the big world and have people coming and going, being engaged in community, it starts and ends right with your door. Can people come and go freely? And again, this is the example of the way we look at designs of essentially landscape solutions. They work for all ages, whether it's a young mom in a stroller, whether it's the kids in their tricycles coming and going, or whether it's someone in later life coming home from the market with their groceries. This is always going to be easier to navigate for every age at every point in life. So I think primary access in and out of the home that's inviting and engaging and functions really well, I think is one of the areas that's really a big gap in the market today. Most people's homes are not designed to do this. They're designed for young families. That's the way we continue to build them even today. So that's really, I think, going to be important. And then the other area I would suggest would be the bathrooms. And so there's different ways to look at it, but generally we kind of say the bathroom or the shower space needs to be big enough for two people. That gives you enough space to move, but also gives you design options around design. This particular one was a tub that was replaced into a shower. So there's no curb going into this at all. You're able to do that in a very, very efficient design. It's just finger control for those glass doors. You notice it's got grab bars and things, but it's all designed in right from the start. So it all looks like it belongs. You can have any design or style you want. It could be a man cave type setup here. The point is, it doesn't look like an institutional solution. And then there's another one again where you can see it's got some grab bars. They always have an overhead shower, a hand spray on a hose, you know, tempostatic or different controls to make sure you don't get scalded. Usually want to have some sort of a stool. I really encourage people to use a portable stool. Gives you way more function and way more room to work with. But you notice the floor is continuous. There's no curb to step over in and out of here. It makes the room bigger and brighter and functions easier. And it's really a question of how you design it. And so this is the piece where most homeowners don't know what that means, and most contractors don't know what it means because homeowners haven't been asking for it. But essentially it just takes the floor and does a very small grade back to a drain in the back, and just a bit of engineering to know how to do that. But generally the incremental cost to do that is about the same as the incremental cost to do glass enclosure. And oddly enough, that's another place we would suggest you want to have minimum amount of glass. It sounds different until you kind of understand how that can work. But those would really be, I think, the two main areas. And the other one is if you're in a multi-level home, is particularly like in a 2-story home, interior lifts now for about 25,000 will get you a full access to your home in terms of at least between the main floor and the second bedroom or second level, where you can continue to have full access to your master bath, your master bedroom, and really you can use it for laundry going up and down, and you know, like a big dumbwaiter. These are really nice units. I'm not talking about stair lifts. These are, and they're not an elevator. They're in between. They usually go up and can be in a hallway, but they can be in a closet or a corner of a room. Those really, I think, really expand the options, and it comes back to location, location, location. If you're in the right location, build and invest in that. If you're in the wrong location, don't spend money on the wrong location. Figure out where it is you need to be, and then make the smart investments there.
That's some really good ideas. So basically, like you said, it's a location, making sure that you're going to have access to everything that you need. Then once you're there, making sure you can have access to your home easily. And then third is the high utility areas. So for instance, like you said, being able to easily access laundry may be an issue if you're having to go up and down the stairs with laundry baskets, or the bathroom, as you mentioned. I'm sure that wet tiles is probably one of the issues that people have to be concerned about. What I really like though, Scott, is like the stuff, it looks really nice. Like it's appealing. It's not, some of the older stuff that you would see with the grab bars and the, very clunky looking things. It's really interesting how it can now be integrated actually into design. And what I also really appreciate is that you're talking about universal design, so that it's applicable to everybody. So it's not just specifically for aging any longer.
Yeah, generally what we've seen are more the institutional type Band-Aid solutions, I call them, the wood deck out in front of the house to kind of navigate the front porch steps and things. And they're really all the result of people not putting the planning and effort into it up front. The economics in terms of the return on investment on this is huge compared to if you're able to stay in your home another 6 months, like it's more than paid for everything I'm talking about doing here. So in terms of places to invest, it's really a smart investment. It's easier to do it earlier when you have more time and more planning and more choices. To say, the later you leave it, the fewer the options are. And I've yet to find anybody who said, "Oh, I want to wait till I'm 75 to do it because that's going to be a lot more fun when I'm older." No, if it's not appealing now, it's not going to be any more appealing later in life. So it gives you time. You're not doing it under a crisis, and once it's under a crisis, you're going to have fewer options and you're going to pay a lot more for it. So from an investment standpoint, you wouldn't do anything that way. So it's just a question of stopping and looking and saying, oh, if I can have something that looks appealing and it's not like an old person's house, then maybe I'm going to lean in a little bit. So yeah, it's a nice option for people once they see it. And that's why we try to be visual with it, because it's just not something people are used to seeing.
Okay, so I mean, this is like a project though. This is not something that you just run to the Home Depot and come home with a few little items and away you go. So how should people actually get started, and then cost? I mean, that's probably going to be a lot of things on most people's mind, is how much is this going to cost? Like, what are sort of the ranges that you're usually looking at to do this type of work?
Sure. So it's partly why we suggest the earlier you start it, particularly before you retire, that really should be when you're thinking about your housing plans anyway. We're all talking about that. Um, it gives you more flexibility around kind of saying, well, maybe if I work another 3 months and get all this, well, sure, then that makes good sense. So in terms of timing, the earlier the better. Certainly in your 50s and in your 60s, I would say you want to do it. We occasionally do them for older clients, but reality is if you haven't done it by then, you're probably, you're not a proactive person, and so you're likely to put it off. Um, in terms of from a cost standpoint, that front entry, I would say for a landscaped entry with a walkway like that, you're probably looking at about $5,000 nominally for a nice kind of finished look with gardens and things. For the lifts, I mentioned those are about 25,000. And with the shower, for example, if your bathrooms are the most used and the most often renovated room in the home anyway. So when it's going to come up, or you kind of say, well, maybe we'll just do that a few years ahead of time, so we're going to be able to use it throughout our lives. The incremental cost, if you're willing to not use glass, which takes some time usually, but I talk people through it and say you can always add glass later, the way we design them, but that can be essentially no incremental cost, but it might be $1,500 incremental cost to put in a shower with no curb. So the cost around this is really not a barrier. People look at it as a barrier because they think of it as a one-time, but from an investment, if you do it from an investment standpoint, and the litmus test I use is, would a realtor tell you to remove it when it came time for resale? And if you can't answer that question, then it says you're not really, you need to look at it a little bit more. No one would ever list a house with a stair lift when you walked in the front door, right? So these are examples of, if that's where you're at and that's kind of in the point in life and that's what you're going to do, that's that's your choice, obviously. But from an investment standpoint, it's going to add the least amount of benefit to you because you're going to be able to use it for the least amount of time, and it's going to have nowhere near the flexibility of some other choices as well.
Some excellent thoughts. So where would you suggest people go to get some ideas or get started even?
So on our website, that's one of the things we really try to do is create the visual opportunities for people just to see all the different options. I've shown you, I think, 3 here, but that's just a good place to go look, because that's in our design work. That's all we do are curbless showers. We don't do curbs, and it's really just a question of knowing what size you need to do it, what space you need to do it. So that kind of helps. I think once people see it, they start to realize, yeah, that's actually pretty good. And so that's certainly a place you can go. And I think generally around education, say, I always look to plug National Aging in Place Council. It's just a great resource for basic education, but also in terms of resources that may be available in your community. It's a good place to go too. So yeah, it's an education, right? This is part of lifelong learning. Start early, take the time to kind of figure out what you want. But the main thing is to make choices and make decisions and then execute on them. I often find myself in the role of negotiating between a couple where one wants one outcome and the other wants a different outcome, and they can't decide. So they get what I call partner paralysis. And in that one, nobody wins. And that's so I try to find ways usually with them to kind of walk them through to say, well, if we did this, then I think you'd get that and you'd get that, and you'd both be happier in the meantime and down the road. But yeah, because it's just a different area that we're not used to in terms of people aren't used to making these decisions. We tend to just repeat what we did. So don't repeat what you did before would be my advice, because it will be wrong, and it's just a question of how can you make it right.
Some excellent advice. And as you mentioned, it's probably something best to think about earlier rather than getting into a situation where you have an incident and you can't actually do anything at that point, then there is no options. So, we really should start to think about this earlier, start to plan, and then actually take action. So thank you so much for this great advice and guidance, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Susan. It's a topic, so I've given you just a very sliver of it today, but I think the key thing there is start early, get the best options.
Absolutely. So thanks again, Scott. And to everybody out there, we hope you found this information valuable and it helps you live your best booming encore. Bye for now, everyone.